Okay. And I'm going to share screen. Second. Sorry. Okay. Not so okay. Second. Let's just get this out of here. Okay. So in text 1, you say, God spoke to Moses saying, you shall make a washstand of copper and its base of copper, and you shall place it between the tent of meeting and the altar, and you shall put water therein. And Aaron and his sons shall wash their hands and feet from it, and when they enter the tent of meeting, they shall wash with water so that they will not die. Or when they approach the altar to serve, make an offering, a fire offering, rise up and spoke to God. And in verse 21, again, this is this coming week's Torah portion. They shall wash their hands and feet so they will not die. This shall be for them a perpetual statute for him and for his descendants for their generations. Okay. So I don't want to get into all the details of how the washing went, but it was hands and feet, and we're going to see a little bit it's a little distracting. I don't know why they actually put it in here, but they put their hands on top of their feet, that right hand on top, on the right foot, on the left hand on the left foot. The main thing is that they were cleansing themselves, going through this washing process. And so look at text 2a. It says, Maimonides writes, the law of the verse that we said in text 1, how does it translate? In law, it is a positive commandment for a priest who serves in the temple to sanctify his hands and feet and afterward perform service, as the verse states. And Aaron and his sons will wash their hands and their feet from it. A priest who serves without sanctifying his hands and feet in the morning is liable for death at the hands of heaven. The verse states they shall wash with water and not die, because they're disrespectful to this apex of divine holiness. In addition, their service, whether that of a high priest or an ordinary priest, is invalid if they didn't wash. It is a mitzvah to sanctify one's hands and feet from the basin. How is the mitzvah of sanctification performed? In this piece, I don't know why they brought it in. It's not really relevant. A priest would put his right hand on his right foot, his left hand on his left foot, and bend over and sanctify them. Praise him and not sanctifying his hands while sitting, because the sanctification is comparable in the temple service, and the temple service may be performed only when standing, as the verse states, to stand and to serve. Okay, that's the main thing. Is about we have this process as part built into the temple service where there has to be a preparatory washing. Now let's look at text 2b. Maimonides writes, a priest does not have to sanctify his hands and feet between every service he performs. Coming in the morning, I'm here at work, got a lot of things for this Kohen to do, the priest to do. They wash their hands, they're good. Instead, he washes once in the morning and may continue serving throughout the day and the subsequent night, provided he does not, A, depart from the temple. Once he's left the temple, now he has to come into a whole new process. B, fall asleep, because then he doesn't know where his hands were. C, use the bathroom, because even though there's nothing wrong with using the bathroom, but in our minds it's something that's dirty, right? So you don't after you're in the bathroom and you're preparing a meal, you want to wash your hands well. So psychologically, to us also, there isn't this idea of proper approach with purity. And D, divert his attention from his hands and feet. If he does any of the above, he must sanctify his hands and feet again. But otherwise, absent that, like I said about Yom Kippur, you're good. Now, what if we look at text 3, Rashi tells us how serious this was. Says, so that they will not die. The verse is written to impose death upon one who serves on the altar when his hands and feet are not washed. For from the first death penalty. Again, this is not a court wouldn't do it. It was from God. Verse 20. We understand only that death is imposed upon one who enters the temple. Morning. And in text 4, say, oh, you're right. Thank you. Keep me honest here. Yeah. Thank you. Is that recording? I started late, but I'm doing it. Yeah. And then, so that this was the one I just read, this verse is the post-death bond, when the serves on the altar when his hands are not washed. This is to talk about how important it is. But now we're going to look at something in text 4 to try and drill down where do we want to go with this. The obligation to wash before entering the temple was a detail in the approach to the temple, which is a place blocked off exclusively for the priestly population and where even the priest would only go for a short time. So here I want to show you, I'm going to actually stop this share and I'm going to show you something. Craig Wilson happened to bring something today which will show it, but I don't know if I can be able to do it well on the screen. So I'll show his book here, but I want to show something first on the screen. This is a diagram of what the tabernacle area looked like. I can pass this around if you want to see this. Here. This will show it to you for those who are in the room. So this part, one would come in from this direction. I think you can see my cursor. And there was a curtain out in front, but a curtain you could walk around. That this space here and on this side also was empty. So you could walk in, and this whole area, that was considered a holy area of the tabernacle, but most of the intensely divine action went on in this little box here. This box wasn't just a box, it was a house, it was a room, Holy of Holies, there's the ark in there, there's another, this large thing here is an altar, and there was another smaller altar in here. So what this is saying here, and I'm going to read it and then I'll go back to the things. The obligation to wash was before entering the temple. It said it means this area here, where only the priest would go in for a short time. As such, one washing was enough, even if the priest was entering to perform multiple services in this section. The altar, on the other hand, this is where animals were offered. That was in the temple courtyard, where Levites and other ordinary Jews would also frequent, for example, in performing laying hands on their personal offerings. As such, a priest was required to wash each time before serving there. So I'm going to go back to the narrative, the text. Okay. So what is it that we're saying over here? That in that compound, there was an area where if you were there, even if you did a priest did a bunch of services, between each service they had to wash their hands again. That's where there was action, where there was distraction, where there was non-service going on, where it wasn't only Kohens. But in the inner sanctuary, once you went in there, whatever you did there, it's fine. You washed your hands, you went there. So there was a difference in Jewish law between going into and functioning in the sanctuary precinct, let's call it, courtyard, or going into the sanctuary itself. Again, which means that coming into you'd wash your hands, or the Kohen would wash their hands coming in to do their work. But if they were going into the inner sanctuary, they washed their hands and they did their work, and it could be, even if it took all day, they walked out, they didn't wash their hands again. Outside, where there was action and people, and it wasn't only Cohen, there was the Goldbergs were there, or whatever the people you meet, and they're inviting you to the bar mitzvah. There's stuff going on. There, they had to wash their hands before each and every service. Okay. Yeah.
When they sacrificed the bull or sheep, or whatever, did they actually bring that in towards the altar? I mean,
it was the outer altar, only the outer altar.
Pardon?
That was all on the outer altar.
Yeah, I'm saying with the rail.
Yeah. That's all. Any animal offerings were on the outer altar. Interior was incense.
So,
yeah, and there's a symbolism to that we're going to talk about. Okay. So, and now that you brought it up, I mean, it's actually a good segue. So there are two altars. And there are two, one is external. They're both holy. One is external, one is internal. For us, this whole idea of the sanctuary and the tabernacle, that's all stuff that we haven't done physically for 2,000 years. But we are supposed to do this spiritually every single day. Actually, 2-3 times a day. Why? Because those were not just functions and slaughtering and a mess with the blood and all this stuff we were talking about before. It was about coming close to oneself and coming close to God. The word for offering korban in the Hebrew means coming close. The idea they were intimacy exercises, whether we can understand them from our point in history or not, because it's hard to get your mind around how slaughtering your sheep is an intimacy exercise, but that's what was going into it. So in these intimacy exercises, there are 2 levels. There's the outer altar and the inner altar, which means that for us also, in our own lives, in our own internal altar, there's going to be these 2 levels. So, 1 second.
So,
yeah,
with the inner altar,
yeah,
it's really between the priest and God. But in the outer altar, they're acting on behalf of others, so they needed to continue to wash their.
I think that there's a lot to be said for that, because of the privacy and the ability for focus. And even though internally they're acting for others too, but they weren't interacting with others as much. There wasn't as much room for distraction. And here there was much more of a meditative ambiance internally than outside. And we can know within ourselves, there's sometimes when we're in a zone, there's privacy or with a special person. And then sometimes we're with a special person, but we're in a crowd, we're in the middle of things. It's not the same thing. It's not as easy to connect and keep the focus when there's so many things that are throwing us off balance. So the external was that parallel, and internal was much more of a meditative, contemplative zone. So text 5. I don't think this is working anymore. Okay. This is from the founder of Chabad. He writes this is a piece he writes in his discourses to help us prepare for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur is, even though we should be focused every day and think about God every day, but Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur is a time when we're a little more zoned in. And we're spending more time in synagogue, and there's more of a cohesive and less distracted, hopefully, frame of mind that we're focused on who we need to be, because it's High Holidays, Rosh Hashanah and Kippur. So in his writings to help us get into that mental place, he writes, our sages tell us that the prayers were instituted in place of the sacrifice, the offerings. That's what the Talmud says. That when we pray today, it's in place of the offerings. Because one was supposed to be a spiritual exercise, and our prayers are a spiritual exercise. To explain, prayer is a service of the heart. And the heart corresponds to the altar. As I said before, we are being encouraged and empowered to create our own inner tabernacle. In our own inner tabernacle, the heart is where we come close to God. We want to come emotionally close to God, not just say words in prayer, not only do acts of goodness, all those are good. We want to feel close to God. That's what prayer is about. Prayer is about opening ourselves and feeling an emotional closeness. That corresponds to the altar. It's our altar inside. Now, just as there were 2 altars, an inner and outer one, so are the 2 dimensions to the heart, an inner and outer heart. So what Rabbi Zalman is saying is that if in the macro model, there were 2 different altars, one an exterior one an interior one, where we went through these exercises of coming close to God, and we were able to connect in our interior, our personal tabernacle, and the heart is where we have our altar, so to speak. There are going to be 2 different levels of our psyche, many levels of our psyche, but generally speaking, two general levels, one inner and one outer. How do we understand that? Let's take a look at text 6. There are 2 elements to the heart. This is also from Rabbi Zalman in a different book, namely to the soul's passion for God, an external one and an internal one. the external dimension is when the heart is impassioned at thinking of God's greatness. A passionate flame of love is ignited when one thinks deeply into such matters. Think that for a second. If you think about a loved one, a spouse, a child, and you think about the things about them that you love, the things that help create the fabric of attraction and connection. So there are things. But is that the only reason you love them? What if those things fell away? What if God forbid something happened? I love her sense of humor. What happens? Sick and she can't speak anymore. There's a love that is deeper than why. There's a love that and we don't think about it because we're functioning on the whys. But there's a part of us when it comes to deep relationships, hopefully between us and God and between us and our loved ones. The internal dimension is that core part of the heart buried deep down, a feeling that is far beyond reason, a feeling deeper than what any thought process can conjure. There are special people in our lives, and we will do things for them that don't necessarily make sense. If you think, I don't know, get into specific scenarios, but cost benefit, the person's sick anyway. What I want to do is I want to take care of my person. I want to take care of my loved one. It's not about my financial advisor. It's about I want to take care of my loved one. Just to use an example. So it's not necessarily there are calculations where I can say, yes, I like this person or I love this person because of this, this, and this. At the end of the day, we love our kids because they're our kids, not only because of the mark they got or whatever it is, and hopefully we love our parents and our spouses probably just because there's a connection. Now, of course there's reasons. That's because we function that way. There are things that brought us into that connection, but we came to a deeper connection. And here, Rabbi Zalman brings just for an example for us that not only in spiritual things and not necessarily smart things, or advisable things. This deeper dimension exists in worldly matters as well. There are certain matters about which a person cares so deeply, matters upon which their entire life depends, at least in their minds, that reach the deepest parts of the heart. Sometimes we have something that means a lot to us. Someone's running for political office. Sometimes they do a lot of stuff that really doesn't make sense, but somehow there's the drive for that perch. At such times, such matters can compel a person to say or do completely irrational things. It happens. Now, so that's not something, again, I probably wouldn't have put this piece in there because it's giving us an example from something that's not praiseworthy. But we know within ourselves that there's things that really strike us deeply. We function on, if we're looking at two altars, we sit and think, I hope every one of us can sit and think about the things God has done for us, the blessings we have. We probably don't think about them enough, but our prayers guide us to that. We have blessings from God. And if I think about blessings from God, I think, thank you, God. We're good. But that's an external, that's good, but then there's a deeper one. What about a person who it's not about what God does for me, just the feeling, maybe they're feeling right now not blessed. There's something that I can't find exactly in the spot I'm in now. I wish God was blessing me. It's not working well, but there's there is the feeling anyway. So the reasons we say Kaddish, praising God after a person passes away. There's just such a beauty to it that a person can do it after they've sustained the drudge, and they're going to say, "Scholar, Shmei Rabba, God is great." The prayer doesn't say anything about dead people or passing. It means that it's just praising God, and at that time, it's especially beautiful. So for us, when it comes to connection with God, and again, we use an understanding connection with others, there's what we're going to call the external altar, which is the way they put it here. When thinking of God's greatness, we can think about all the good things God does for us, and that's a really important thing because we're humans and we have to find a way in that our reason and our rationale can say, yes, God has been great to me, but then there's a part of us that's beyond what God has done for me. It's just like other loved ones. It's not about what they did for me. I love them, and with God too, that connection can be felt and should be achieved. So to unpack that, text 7 says 2 of the services performed in the temple were offerings and burning incense. The former was performed in the copper altar, on the copper altar outside in the temple courtyard, where I showed you the drawing. One was outside, that's where the offerings were, whereas the latter was performed on the golden altar inside the temple building. And so these 2 forms of service are symbolic of 2 types of religious service. The offering sacrifices are symbolic of one's service in their outer heart, and incense is symbolic of one's service in their inner heart. What does that mean? So before we get to text A, we speak in Jewish spiritual language, of Hasidic thought and Kabbalistic thought, about the fact that we have within ourselves, we have different levels of personality. Like I said last night, the idea of reaching for a couple of pieces of salami for me 9:30 at night didn't make sense. But it was an impulse, a physical impulse. We all have that. It's self-oriented, and that's the layer of personality through which we operate. But then we have a higher self, we have a visionary self, where that has a mental clarity which says, not a good idea. Who cares what the appetite says? It's not a good idea. Who cares what other people are doing? Who cares what looks fun? It's not a good idea. That we call the divine soul. So the language over thousands of years has been, there's like a divine soul and an animal soul. There's nothing wrong with an animal, but an animal is instinctive. And you can train an animal by shaping their instinct. But an animal is about what they want. There's a part of us also. It's not bad, but it's animal. This is what I want. And the divine soul is, what do I really need to do? It's not about what I want. This is what we talk to the bar mitzvah kids. Whenever there's a bar mitzvah kid, we talk. This is the beginning of getting a grip on disciplining yourself and making good choices, not only about what looks good and what you want, but about what's right. That no animal. No. I'm sorry. So there's. Hang on a second. Okay. I'm sorry, I'll go back to the share screen. No animal, if you're housebreaking a cat or a dog, what you have to do is train them. You have to shape their instincts. No animal has the capacity to say, from what we know, and what Torah tells us, no animal has the capacity to say, I really want to pee on the carpet. But it seems they just shampooed it, and they've been nice to me, and I'm not going to do it to them. They don't have that capacity. They get a little swat on the rump. They know they don't pee on the carpet. They don't have the capacity for self-analysis and moral choice. This is what I want to do. And they want to eat what they want to eat, and if they enough time they eat that doesn't feel good, maybe they'll stop eating it. It's very self-oriented. Our animals also self-oriented, and we have a higher part of us it's other-oriented, that's God-oriented. Now, we're all struggling with both. We're all struggling at least with the outer one. In text A, find this is from the Rabbi. You want to? Thank you. Thank you. Text A. Here's the difference between the inner and outer altar. The outer altar was for offerings, which is associated with the task of what's in Hebrew it's called birurim. Birurim means to refine and transform materialism into holiness. It would be taking our own animal. The animal was, it was an animal and was going to be, in most cases, eaten by the Kohanes or needy people. But the idea is that it symbolized our own animals and saying, I want to bring my own ego and my own self-orientation on the altar of God's love and be able to connect. We, as per the ritual of taking an animal and sacrificing it up to God. So we were the outer one was about struggling with our animal. Contrast, the inner altar was for offering incense, which is associated not with transforming the mundane, but rather with increasing one's connection with God. The internal inner and outer altars within every person mirror these two approaches. The outer altar corresponds to the outer heart, which is where the work of transforming the mundane takes place. By contrast, the inner altar corresponds to the inner heart, where transforming the mundane is irrelevant. Within the inner heart, the approach is all about deepening one's connection with God. Think about a couple. They're both working, they're both distracted, and they think how we got to make time for each other, we've got to connect with each other, we have to be careful about each other's feelings, despite the fact that we're getting bounced around by life. That's the outer altar of life. Dealing with the fact that I have a value, and then there's me and the way I'm reacting. And yes, I have a problem at work, or what's my supervisor saying to me, or how are we going to pay that bill? And yet I have to pay attention to you because I'm home. We want to connect at home. That's the struggle. But then that couple decides to go away for a weekend and leave their phones behind. This is not about not a struggle. This is about just deepening the relationship. It's getting to a place where there aren't all those distractions. It's just about zeroing in. That's the inner incense altar. Just to be able to, beyond the distractions and the struggle, just about deepening one's connection, either deepening one's connection with God, and the example would be deepening one's connection with a loved one. So, if you look at text 8b, along the same lines, this is from the Rabbi. A person who's still operating with their outer heart is in a place where they still have much to do with this world, and by extension are susceptible to negative forces. They're in the trenches. And when we're in the trenches, it's not so easy to keep yourself emotionally and psychologically in a perfect place with those who matter to you, because you're dealing with the barbarians at the gate. As such, they must always preempt this risk. So what would they do? Each time they'd have to wash their hands. To go back to the Kohens in the temple courtyard. Every time they were going to approach for a service, they had to wash their hands again. I got to get back in the zone. I was just dealing with a bunch of other things. Thus, every time a Jew takes a step forward to serve God in the manner representative of the outer altar, they require a preparatory washing. That's why I prayed in the morning, I washed my hands. Today, when I'm praying in the afternoon, I got to wash my hands again because I'm dealing with things. I'm writing checks on whatever it is I'm dealing with. It's not bad stuff, but it's not a zone of me and God. When I want to get back into that zone, to wash the hands, to rinse off an attitude so that it can be connected. However, when a Jew has matured to a level where they operate with their inner heart, they are already removed from mundanity. For such a person, a one-time washing performed for entering into the service is enough. So when we are living like the Kohen who went into the internal holy structure, even if you're there for hours, in that zone, you don't have to. You're not battling off the confusion and the distractions. And one hand washing is enough for the entire session. So, how do we get? That's what we're getting from our Torah portion. But now, try to bring it home to us. The inner heart. How can I find? Let's talk about just between me and God. Between us, a loved one, so you can use this as a model. Between me and God, how do I get into a place where I'm not full of confusion, I'm not looking at my phone, I'm not just, my mind isn't wandering, that I'm really connected. So text 9, we have from the founder of Chabad, says the entire purpose of the human experience and the primary thrust of what we call teshuvah. Teshuvah, again, this is what he wrote this also about preparation for Rosh Hashanah and Kippur, but it's all year round. We do something called teshuvah, which is kind of realigning ourselves with God, reconnecting, rebalancing ourselves, like we would do in a relationship. And that's encapsulating King David's words, on your behalf, my heart says, seek my presence, which in Hebrew means, the word is panai, seek my presence. In other words, we're saying to God, come to me, find me. The word panai also means the innermost part of your heart. The heart cries out, seek out my truest depth. We're saying to God, I'm yours. Know me to my depth and connect with me in my depth. This is a teshuva from the depths of the heart, as someone who thinks deeply with their entire mind and heart does something upon which the very life depends. We're zoned in. We're connected. We're a prayer, whether on a Sunday in March or Rosh Hashanah in Kippur. It's put our phone to the side. It's quiet moments and saying, God, I want a relationship with you. I want to know you and you know me. Connect with me. I want to feel you inside me. This is a great love that transcends all reason. Love that is based on reason and can be processed with simple logic lacks a type of depth that consumes the person who is aflame with great love that is beyond all reason. So even though we want to use our calculations, it would be a great idea to sit in a room and say something. How do you feel blessed by God today? And I hope we all do feel blessed by God. And hopefully we'll walk out feeling closer to God. We're talking about a deeper level. Not on what God do for me today, but what God is to me. My love for my family shouldn't only be what they do for me. It's what they mean to me beyond what they do. My love for God is also this idea of a connection that is fundamental and really beyond any reasoning, any calculation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, a little earlier, the text mentions smicha, and then similarly mentions birurim.
Okay.
Okay. Now, does that imply that the fact of laying on hands raises the recipient of smicha to a higher level, such as when you are being blessed as a rabbi, does that mean that you are being raised to a higher level by the rabbi who is giving you smicha?
As a teacher of mine would have said, that's a very good analogy. But remember, you know who they were doing smicha on? Animals. So you say, first recognize you're a behemoth. That you're who smicha is done on. It's but I guess it's a fair analogy. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Right.
Now that also raises the question, though, if you are giving an animal smicha,
yeah,
does that make it actually kosher to slaughter them?
No. Smicha is connecting that this is for me. That's what it's really almost a transference of identity almost.
Mm-hmm.
So text 10a, it says along these lines, Rabbi Zalman writes, every individual spark of the Shekhinah of God, which is godliness, the godly presence, hosted in the soul of each and every Jew, is temporarily redeemed from captivity during prayer that comes from the depth of the heart. We have godliness within us, and we have a divine psyche, and our divine psyche can be very lonely because we're focused on cotton candy and hot dogs. Thinking about godliness, thinking about our relationship, we're saying that it frees the language of Kabbalah. It frees that godliness from its inner captivity within our psyche because it's there. It's aching to be manifested and actualized. So now, if you look at 10b, getting more into prayer, the general difference between prayer as compared to Torah and mitzvahs, let's say, lighting a Shabbos candle, putting on tefillin, which is so cosmic and important. So Torah study is about understanding. You're telling me something. I'm going to teach. We're going to talk Torah law, banking law. It's Torah. It's holy, but we're engaging banking. And of course, you need a presence of mind, and you need each our individual rationale. We need to ask the questions. We need to struggle with it, and there's a sense of self. Person is conscious of themselves. Certainly, when it comes to fulfilling mitzvahs that are performed with physical things and are finite, meaning like tefillin must be a certain size, there are precisely 32 strings in the tzitzit, so on. The person is conscious of themselves. We're dealing with a physical world. It's holy articles, but it's all within the physical and very much present existence. We're not losing ourselves. By contrast, when one prays and we're properly connected to God, the person is completely subdued before God. Even though the person is asking for their own personal needs, it's not about that. They're connecting with a loving spouse or a loving parent. They want to lose themselves in God. And saying to God, in order for me to be able to be who I need to be, I need these things. but it's not really about their self orientation. They're still entirely submitted to God. This is what it means that prayer is associated with the inner heart. This then is what the verse states: God is close to all who truly call out to him. It refers to the cry of prayer that comes from the inner depths of the heart. That when we call God from our deepest selves, this is something that where God is always close to us, and because we're feeling close to God, and it's an interactive universe. When we're truly feeling close to God, God is close to us. Then Hasidic thought tells us another thing, which is kind of counterintuitive, about how we can, well, before I go to that. So this idea of prayer is really about manifesting our deepest self. Because what people really want is they want a connection with God. And when I'm expressing it and I'm feeling it, and I'm not just saying words, but I want, that's my deep self. It's not for a reason, something I need. I'm not came to synagogue for a bar mitzvah, or because whatever it is what I do. It's because or I'm praying at home even. But the idea is a sense of connection. Now, somewhat counterintuitively, you say there's another way of getting a deep connection with our deepest selves. And that has nothing to do with prayer. It's about charity. Let's look at text 11. The reality, the Rabbi writes here, is that not everyone is able to reach such emotional levels. So the average person needs a nudge from on high to help them expose their inner heart. How do we bring out our best selves? Inasmuch as everything that comes from high is associated with some sort of a human initiative, the vehicle for this nudge is charity, for charity also exposes the inner heart. And as we're going to read further, when we reach outside of ourselves for someone else, we're touching a very deep part of ourselves, because we all want connections. We all want to make a difference in the world, and outside, beyond our own driveway. And we want to be useful. And when we give of ourselves to another, hopefully it makes us feel good inside. It's bringing out our best self. When we give to another in a way that's not totally comfortable for us, it's even more meaningful to us, because I gave up my comfort for someone else. There's an inner glow. We're bringing out our best self. Text 12. This redemption is accomplished through giving charity, especially by those in difficult financial straits who don't have much. When such people give, they give away their very life, quite literally. We all need money to live. We all need assets to live. We have to be responsible with those. But if I've only got this amount of marbles, well, why would I give it to anyone else? I got to take care of myself. And for me to say, I have this, but there's someone else who needs it even more than I do. I can manage with giving away the 50 cents or the dollar, whatever it is. That's tremendously beautiful, because what they're doing is they're really putting themselves to the side. And when we put our self-orientation to the side, our best self is waiting to come out. Even more specifically, if the money is the fruit of a person's own labor, it's impossible the person did not, on many occasions, invest themselves completely to the very core of their being in acquiring that money, as is the way of the world when doing business. You know, speaking to the guy who I filled up my gas tank this morning, and he was saying how hard he works. My heart goes out to him. And as a second job too, if that guy who was just talking about how he struggles, if he would give away 50 cents to a person in need, look at him, he's giving away it's him. It's not just 50 cents. He puts his guts into this. So when a person donates the product of that hard work and gives it away with joy for God, the soul is thereby relieved from captivity. That helps blow away our own self-absorption. The innermost part of the soul that was previously trapped in the clutches of negativity is now redeemed by this act of charity. So what I was saying here is that itself can open us up more in prayer. As a matter of fact, in the Talmud, it would say, the great rabbis would say, they would, before prayer, they would give some charity. Put a quarter in the pushka, whatever it is. The idea was, I want to get into a selfless place. I'm going to give away a little bit of myself, and I want to open myself up to you, God. And text 13a, this is also from the Rabbi. It says every mitzvah in the Talmud, particularly the Jerusalem Talmud, every mitzvah is called tzedakah at some level. Putting on tefillin is also called tzedakah in a way. Putting the lighting Shabbos candles also. Why is that tzedakah? We explained earlier the mitzvahs are limited. So how can charity expose the inner heart more than any other mitzvah? There are two types of charity. Why is charity? First of all, why are those mitzvahs considered charity? Because if I don't have time, and I say, you know something, I'm going to put my interest to the side, and I'm going to put on tefillin. It's also tzedakah in a way. When that I have to make it home in time to light a Shabbos candle, I'm giving of myself to God. But when we talk about specifically financial charity, there are two types of charity. There's a limited form that one gives to perform the mitzvah of tzedakah. So the Talmud says you have to be responsible. You're supposed to give. We give a tithe, maximum of a fifth of income. But then there's another type of tzedakah that is unlimited, not connected with the actual mitzvah of tzedakah, rather a purer form of tzedakah. For example, when one gives tzedakah in the spirit of, with charity you'll remove your sin. Daniel says that charity, it cleanses us. Whatever a person he has, he will give for his life, without any limit at all. When giving charity in such a manner, the giver's conscious ego is entirely subdued. We're putting ourselves to the side and saying, I just need to help this person. For the concept of with charity will remove your sin is associated with tshuva that is all about subduing one's ego. Again, you have to make sure we have enough money to pay the rent and take care of our family. But the idea is that sometimes we'll go beyond what our financial planner would make sense because we feel we want to be able to give of ourselves. The feeling it evokes is one of, I want to abandon my previous state of being that didn't recognize godliness. I want to get out of the self-centeredness, and I don't want to be as I was prior. From all of this, we can understand this form of tzedakah reaches the inner parts of the soul, as the person gives away something which they invested their very life. The conclusion from this discussion is that tzedakah is connected with prayer. It's like prayer in a way, in the sense that it shares a similar quality of exposing the innermost part of the soul. And finally, on 13b, we want to say tzedakah is an exercise that helps us expose our deepest self. So in a way, it's like prayer. It's like teshuvah. So classic of the Rabbi says, actually, it's even greater. Tzedakah is even greater than prayer. Why? Because the entire purpose of creation is to transform mundane matters so the physical world becomes a home for God. When I sit in a room quietly and I pray to God and I feel close to God and emotionally I've connected, that's productive. It's wonderful. But what I've done is I've molded my emotions and put them in a good place. I haven't touched the physical world except for my physical heart. But the whole point is to make the physical world holier. And through physical charity, we make the physical world better. This is accomplished with physical charity. By contrast, when one prays, the dedication, commitment to God is experienced in the soul. It doesn't impact anything material. But tzedakah is something very physical and impacts a person's materialistic tendencies. And so it reveals the inner soul. This is greater than prayer, for it is aligned with the purpose of creation. This is analogous to someone trying to hoist up a building. You need to put the lever underneath the bottommost beam. So it is with creating a home for God. The home is a place for God's true essence to be manifest. And if you want to lift the world, we start with the bottom, with the physical, even with money. And it happens through material actions like charity. So, and we'll just go through key points. And if there are any questions, it's on 171. There we go. Got it. The priests washed their hands and feet before the service in the temple every day. We established that. Now, one washing was enough for the whole day, unless they were distracted in some way in between. So when approaching the outer altar in the courtyard, which was a place of distraction, there they had to wash each time. So just like within the temple, with the altars, there are also inner and outer dimensions to the heart. The latter is the conscious heart, what a person thinks they want in life, and the inner heart is much deeper, those things a person really wants. Right? So We want, but then what do we really want? Matters that the outer heart desires have ready explanations, as opposed to those of the inner heart. In the context of a relationship with God, an attachment formed in the outer heart is based on reason. An attachment with God from the inner heart is deep enough to not require any. When serving God from the outer heart, the Jew is more at risk because, like anything else in any relationship, because we haven't kept our focus. So we must watch each time, not so with the inner heart. Prayer and charity are methods of accessing the inner heart, and charity is actually preferred. Obviously, we need to pray too, but there's an advantage to charity as it is more closely aligned with the purpose of creation. Stop the share. So I don't know if there are any questions.
You may have discussed it before I came in. I apologize. What's
that is
with the ramp?
That's the outer altar. That's a drawing of how the tabernacle, we'll call it precinct, looked. That was walking into the temple courtyard, was going into this into the curtains. Yeah. The outer altar was there. That's where the animals were offered, and this was a building which was the holy and the holy of holies. And in
why the ramp?
The Torah says clearly should be a ramp. Yeah, the Torah says clearly, the scripture says explicitly they should go up by a ramp, not with steps. The reason is what Craig just said. It says because they wore robes, so just even to the steps, not to expose themselves.
That's not for a wheelchair.
So it was ADA compliant. Yes. Yes.
Okay. What's the size of? I'm sure some are done in this way, some are done in that way.
This has a whole book that has all the.
What is done?
Dunam. It's No, it's Amos. Amos. We don't do Dunams. You do. That's we do Amos.
What is the metric system?
Okay, an amma is about 19 inches. Any questions? If not, wish you all a wonderful Purim. Our Purim party is tomorrow night at 6:15 in the new sanctuary, which is almost finished. Have fun.
Thank you.
Is more important than